Now, what I want to know is, let's say you have all the wealth that you want to have. Don't you think you will have the health, and you will have the love, and you'll have what's the other one? Like, don't you think the happiness you want? Don't you think it will cover up for that trait?
I don't think so. We've all heard the stories, right? There's billionaires out there who are unhappy, or or who die young, through health-related problems. And so I don't think wealth. They say wealth brings the happiness, right? I think what wealth can do is eliminate some of the stress from life.
Man, that's interesting. Your story is interesting, and I think everyone that is going through a situation like this can really, really relate with it. And just because of time, I just wanted to give give one advice for someone watching. They may not be going through the same situation like you, but maybe similar.
Yeah. Look, I'll look into the camera and just say, if you're suffering right now and you're going through a dark moment, you're not alone, okay? You might feel like you're alone right now, but you're not alone. There's people around you who want to help. Just accept that help. I made those mistakes in the early days, and in hindsight, I wish I had taken that help sooner. But just understand, you're not alone, not only in the help that's around you, but also in the suffering you're going through. There's other people who have been through something similar. And so just know you're part of a wider community here. And don't feel afraid to sort of reach out for that support, because you need it for yourself to become resourceful. And there is light at the end of the tunnel. There is a future. I went from the darkest of dark places to a place now where I am well enough to help others, and you can do the same.
Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of our Success in Dubai show. Our goal on this show is to bring to you the people and the experiences that will help you to achieve your goal while living in Dubai. Today's guest is Rakesh. Rakesh, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here with you today. Thanks for having me, Archer.
Yeah, so first of all, I want to say thank you for the setting out time. Dubai is a very busy city, and for you to set out time like this on a Sunday morning to come to the show, it's interesting. So I want to say thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, my pleasure. And the second you reached out and mentioned I had the opportunity to come along, I really wanted to make it happen. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. So first of all, I want us to get into a little bit of background about yourself, because I always like the people listening to know where you're coming from, and just to give them a brief who you are and how you've come to where you are now. So let's go back 20 years back.
Okay.
Who was Rakesh 20 years back?
Okay,
and how did you evolve to who you are now?
Okay, great. I mean, maybe I'll go even slightly further back than that. So I was born in England.
All right.
To parents who had immigrated to the UK from India. So back in the 70s, there was a wave of immigration, coming from India. There was a lot of demand for laborers in a West London area. So that's where my parents' journey began. And then my sister was born, and I was born a year later. So that's where we ended up settling down in the West London area. It's quite a famous, well-known area called Southall. And this is where there's a huge Indian settlement, but there's a lot of different cultures there today. It's a real, let's say, hot pot of cultures. Great place. So that's where I grew up, and that's where I studied. I navigated through the educational system all the way, made it to university, and attended London Metropolitan University. That was my first taste of living away from home. So that was great for just general personal growth and independence, fending for yourself and so on. Stayed there for most of my life. And then it was just 5 years ago that I moved here to the UAE and settled in Dubai. So that's just a little bit of background in terms of where I'm from and how long I've been here in the UAE.
Oh, that's interesting. So after your university studies in London, what did you do? You just moved to Dubai?
No, I got into the workforce. I graduated with a business finance degree. And And so I initially started to work as a finance analyst and working in accounting roles, which was great. It was aligned to what I had studied, but ultimately it became a little bit, let's say, very similar day after day, doing the same sort of thing. There were some commercial elements involved, but it wasn't particularly exciting. And so I managed to pivot a little bit, leverage a lot of the sort of the financial skills I had, and I moved more into commercial roles. So I joined a data center company back in 2010, back when nobody knew what data centers were. And so it was, it was an exciting period, but always challenging when somebody asked, so what's a data center company? And you try and explain this thing that nobody understands. So I ended up staying at this company for 14 years in London. They were going through a lot of growth at the time, so I managed to travel around the world with the company, spend time in Silicon Valley, which was the area where the company was founded, and also in Asia. Once we expanded into Asia, spent time in Singapore as well. So a lot of opportunities came from that role. Yeah.
And that's interesting. Like you've taught the world within that role.
Yeah, exactly. It was fantastic, not only to sort of experience these cultures firsthand, but also to see the cultural differences within organizations. When you're working for a global company and you're trying to, do business across borders, you realize you need to adapt and you need to take account of the cultures and the norms and the values that exist in different countries. So it was really interesting, and great learning opportunities.
Man, that is interesting. So you should have a lot of experience. Let's get into success in Dubai.
Yeah.
Another question that I love asking the guests on the show is what they think about success.
Okay.
Because when I brought this up and everyone was asking me, why did you put success in Dubai? I'm like, everyone have their own definition of success.
Yeah.
And so I like to hear, what is your own definition of success?
Sure. I like that you said everyone has their own definition of success.
Yeah.
Because for me, success is not measured in, one category or another, It's really, for me, it's really about living your life in line with your values and your norms, right? And so for every individual, that's different, right? We all come with our experiences and knowledge we've gained from our years of existence. And, this is where our values and norms come from, right? So if I have certain expectations of myself to be living let's say the category of health at a certain level, I think if I'm living below that level, there's going to be a degree of unhappiness that creeps into my life, and I'm going to start to feel unsuccessful in the realm of health. Similarly, I think classically, folks will think about success measured by wealth. And that is another category, right? And so if I have a certain expectation of how much I should be earning, how much I should have saved in my emergency fund, how much I should have invested, for the future, for my children. If I am, performing under my expectations, again, there's going to be a level of unsatisfaction, So this is my definition of success. It's identifying, what is your expectation across different categories. And for me, there's 4 categories. There's health, there's wealth, there's love, and happiness. And so, if I'm living in line with my expectations across those categories, then I feel successful.
That's interesting. Do you think that there is one category that can cover up for the rest?
I don't think so. I think it's okay to focus on one category at a time. It's difficult to focus on 4 categories at the same time, right? And sometimes we need to overcompensate in areas where the attention is needed. And so that's okay. But I think if we focus too much in one area and we neglect other areas, it can create fragility. By that, what I mean is if I'm really great in my health category, but I don't focus on wealth or the love category, if something goes wrong in my health category,
definitely
then everything falls apart. Exactly. I feel like my whole life will crumble down. Whereas if I'm focusing, even at different times in my life in all of the categories, making sure the cup is quite full in those categories, then if something falls apart in one of the categories, I've got enough reserve in the other categories to keep me going.
That is interesting. Now, what I want to know is, let's say you have all the wealth that you want to have. Don't you think you'll have the health and you'll have the love and you'll have, what is the other one? Like, don't you think
Happiness, yeah.
the happiness you want? Don't you think it will cover up for the other three?
I don't think so. You know, we've all heard the stories, right? There's billionaires out there who are unhappy, or you know, or who die young, you know, through health-related problems. And so I don't think wealth. You know, they say wealth brings the happiness, right? I think what wealth can do is eliminate some of the stress from life. You know, the day-to-day stress of, you know, having to pay your next bill or paying for your children's education, or you know, just you know, maybe even treating your partner to a nice meal out or something like that. If we don't have enough wealth to cover the basis, there's an element of stress that comes in, which can contribute to unhappiness. But I don't think, you know, I think once you get above a certain threshold, and I think the studies have been done in the US, it was $70,000. Once you get above $70,000 of income, the trajectory of happiness related sort of well-being actually diminishes. And so, yeah, to a certain point, it helps. And then after that, I think the focus is actually needed in the categories of happiness. You know, what do you identify as happiness in your life? What does love mean to you and your loved ones around you? And how do you play your part in that? What is your definition of happiness, you know, overall? And what are you doing to move in that direction every single day of your life? You know, I think the focus is needed in these areas. Wealth itself doesn't cover it, unfortunately.
That is interesting. So in response or in regard to what you just said right now, do you consider yourself successful?
Yes, today I definitely live a life of success. I have a gratitude, let's say, a habit, you know, and every day when I'm sitting at the breakfast table and the dining table with the family, we go around the table and we ask each other, you know, what made you happy today? We also ask each other, what made you sad today? Because it's good to uncover that, especially with the children, to just find some details that you wouldn't otherwise come across. And then we finish it off with, what are you grateful for? And just having a few moments to talk about what we're grateful for really brings to the surface the things that we have around us. You know, every day we're grateful for our family, having a roof over our heads, having the food on the table. And when we remind ourselves of these basic yet foundational elements, then yeah, it's a reminder that we have what we need, you know. And so yeah, these are, you know, this is one example of how we remind ourselves of the success that we have in our lives. But you know, we practice this across all the pillars.
Yeah, that is interesting. You mentioned something, gratefulness. I just few days ago, I was talking to a friend of mine, and he's a coach as well. He told me that, what am I grateful for? Like, and I was thinking about it, and then I asked him, what is he grateful for? He told me he's grateful for, and it got my attention. He told me he's grateful that he have a heart that beats 24/7 without stopping.
Right.
So I was like, man, that was really deep.
Yes.
Because I never thought, I mean, I could say I'm grateful for life, and it could just mean a general statement. But the way he went into the specific, like he's grateful for having a heart that beats 24/7 without stopping. I mean, I kind of like thought of it. I'm like, it's really interesting.
That's really powerful, because if we go to that level, then there is never a moment in our lives where we need to feel ungrateful. There's always something to be grateful for, because so long as we're alive, our heart is beating, right? So no matter which situation we find ourselves in, we can always be grateful for that. So I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's get a little bit deep into your story, because I've known you for a while, and I know your story a little bit, but I want us to get a little bit into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure, absolutely. So look, a few years ago, I had unimaginably tragic event that took place in my life. So this was in 2019 when my first daughter was born. She
All
was
right.
born December 15th, 2019. And, you know, this was a daughter that my partner and I had been craving for
To
a
have.
long time. Yeah. My partner, she had suffered a miscarriage the year earlier, which was devastating for her and, of course, for myself as well. But finally, we had our daughter. And, you know, this was towards the end of the year. So we enjoyed a really, you know, positive time together as a family. We enjoyed Christmas at my parents' house, and a lot of people came together to really celebrate our daughter. And New Year's was equally amazing. You know, this was sort of New Year's Eve. We spent it at home with the family, of course, tending to our new duties as parents. But you know, this is where the tragedy unfortunately struck. On the 1st of Jan, we went to bed and everything was absolutely fine. The following day, I was due back at work, so I slept in another room, and I woke at 6 in the morning to the sound of my daughter Mia crying. So I decided to go and help Claire, my partner, you know, tend to the baby. And so as I went into the room, I realized Claire was still sleeping. So I quickly took the baby into the kitchen so that Claire finally gets some rest. Because, of course, as you can imagine, in the early days of parenthood, like nobody's getting any rest, and especially the mother, right? So anyway, 5 minutes later, I returned and Claire was still seemingly asleep. So I was like a little concerned, like something's not quite right. So I approached her and I immediately realized something was wrong. She was in a slightly awkward position. And so I, you know, called out her name. She didn't respond. I then said it a little bit louder and I started to get a little bit concerned. And as I got closer, I realized that, you know, at that time, shockingly, she wasn't breathing and she was a little cold to the touch as well. So this is where I realized, like, oh, we have a huge problem here. And I immediately called the emergency services, told them, like, hey, got the situation here. My wife isn't breathing. And they immediately, you know, started instructing me on how to perform CPR. And luckily, I'd had some sort of first aid training in my workplace. And so I had some practice here. So I rolled her off the bed, as they informed me to do, onto the floor, placed our 18-day-old baby on the floor next to me as well. They asked me to open the front door so the ambulance services could enter, you know, immediately when they arrived. And I started to perform CPR on my wife, you know. So those were 13 of the most tragic minutes of my life, that's for sure. The ambulance finally arrived and they took over and so on. But unfortunately, this was at 6 o'clock when all of this unfolded, but just 90 minutes later at 7:30, the doctors told me there was nothing more they could do for her. And they had declared that she had passed away. So this was the tragedy that unfolded. And so I had this 18-day-old daughter of mine in my hands. Her mother somehow had seemingly passed away suddenly. There was no indication that this was about to happen. And and from that moment onwards, I found myself in a spiral of grief and despair, you know. So that's where the sort of the next chapter, shall we say, of the journey started. Yeah.
Man, that is interesting. And how did you manage yourself during those
I
challenging moments?
Extremely difficult in the first 24 hours. You know, tragically, Claire's parents were on their way to England. She's French. They lived in France. And so they were on their over that morning to come and see the baby and to see their daughter since the first time since she had given birth. So one of the things on my mind immediately was I had to contact them and divert their taxi from going to my house to the hospital.
Oh, shit.
And I then had to break the news to her parents that their daughter had passed away at the age of 32 with no indications of illness or sickness or anything like that. So, that was, you know, in the immediate aftermath, just a few hours after she passed away. That was one of the most difficult things I had to do. And then from that moment onwards, it was really dealing with everything that comes after your loved one passes away, and of course the additional challenge of having a baby there
And it's
with me. Yeah,
18 days, baby.
exactly.
What was the look on their parents when they were coming to visit this newborn baby and they
Yeah,
instead come and find their
they
daughter
were,
dead?
even when they arrived at the hospital, they sort of jumped out of the taxi with a smile on their face, you know. So they came, but I guess they
Yeah,
told me afterwards that they thought there was something wrong with Mia, the baby, because in the early days, like things
Yeah,
can go wrong.
things could go
Babies
wrong.
are very fragile, and at the moment where they started to panic even more was when they realized that they walked past a room where they saw the baby, but they didn't see the mother. So this is where they started to panic, and then they just asked me, you know, where is Claire? And you know, I had to then somehow get the words out and explain to them that, yeah, it's
This
the
is what
worst
happened.
unimaginable thing happened this morning. So she died from a condition called myocarditis, which is it's a reaction that your immune system has, which is an overreaction, and in her case caused inflammation in the heart muscle tissues, constraining her heart and in effect heart failure in the night. And so by all estimates, a few months later it was determined she probably died around 2 hours before I found her there in the morning. Yeah, yeah. This was, and it's a rare condition that basically affects young and healthy people. Yeah, yeah. So this is the biggest tragedy. We hear about it in sports sometimes. You know, sometimes there's footballers playing football
Yeah,
and they kind of
yeah.
just drop on the pitch. Some of these cases have been related to myocarditis. Yeah,
So how did you rebuild yourself, like from that moment?
yeah.
How did you?
You know, the immediate thing that I remember was the support system that was around me. I had a close knit sort of community of friends. Of course, you know, I grew up in England, and so I had these friends from high school that were very close to me. But I also had one of my best friends who had relocated to the US a few years earlier.
Okay.
He was one of the first people I called, and from the hospital, and told him like what had happened. Interestingly, his wife was around 7 or 8 months pregnant with twins at the time, but he left her there in the US and took the first flight over to London to come and be with me.
Oh.
So you know, this support from people around me. My parents were immediately there at the hospital. My older sister was in the country because both of my sisters at the time were actually living here in Dubai as well. But my older sister was there in the country, and so yeah, my sister, my parents, my friends, but especially my friend who traveled over from the US, it made a whole load of difference to the immediate days that followed. Just having that support and almost outsourcing decision making, which is what I did with my friend from the US. We had a discussion, and we came to a realization that I was completely unresourceful, and I was in no position to be making meaningful decisions that could potentially impact, you know, my future or Mia's future or impact people around me. And so I outsourced all important decision making to him. So I didn't have to deal with that anymore. And he was able to basically make decisions from a perspective of resourcefulness.
Man, that is interesting. So you trusted him that much to make decisions for the future ahead and for the present.
Yeah, it was two things. You know, it was a combination of the trust I had in him, which we had built up over many years, but also the distrust I found in my state.
Okay,
Yeah, I recognized that my state was anything but normal, and for me to be there for my daughter, who was just, you know, a couple of weeks old, who had lost her mother. The last thing she needed was for her father to be present, but to also lose her father as well. And so outsourcing those decisions meant that I could focus on being present with her. And if I needed the sort of the guidance or the advice from people around me, like they were just, we had that agreement already. They were just, you know, ready to provide it. But also my mum and dad and my older sister at the time, physically present to take the baby from my hands. You know, I immediately moved into the house where I lived with Claire, where she died. and I immediately moved into my parents' house. And so there I had, experienced hands in my parents who had raised three children themselves
Yeah.
to really help me during this time. But, to an extent, I probably made many mistakes in those early days. I was adamant on doing the nights with the daughter and taking care of her myself. And so for, I think, the first couple of months, I put myself in a really bad physical state, extremely tired and unresourceful, because I insisted on doing what I thought was the right thing, which was to be with her and to make sure she had her father present. But in hindsight, I needed to take time to recover, and I should have taken more quickly the help that was there and available from my family. Eventually, I came to that realization, and my parents started to help me with the nights, and my sister started to help me with the nights, and all of those duties that come along with raising a baby. So eventually, we found the balance. But in the immediate sort of first couple of months, there was these sort of things in hindsight I wish I had done differently.
Man, that is interesting. And I also hear you talking about emotions a lot. And I'm kind of curious, how were your emotions at that particular moment? And how did you navigate your way through life from that time till right now?
Yeah, at that time, it's difficult to even remember what the emotions were, but it's basically a lot of grief, right? You've gone from an extreme a period of happiness where you've welcomed this baby that you've been really looking for a long period of time. My partner had gone through, 9 months of pregnancy, which I think all women out there will understand is a very difficult period for women. And even postpartum, that is it's known as the fourth trimester, right? Where it's not really spoken about much, but, women are really struggling with a lot of post-delivery related issues, both physically and mentally as well, also known as sort of baby blues and other issues that emerge, right? So, she had gone through a lot, but we were so grateful to have this baby finally in our hands and to be able to look forward to the rest of our lives together as a family. And then suddenly for her to pass away, the biggest sort of mental challenge I had at the time was, she worked really hard to deliver this baby, and now she's not around to be able to enjoy it.
Yeah.
And so it was the anguish of, I felt really bad for her. It was almost a guilt as well. Like, oh, she did the hard work and I get the baby now on my own. Like, I felt really guilty. Like, how come she doesn't get to enjoy the baby, but somehow I do? Even though at the time I think, enjoyable. It was difficult to say I was enjoying that period. But of course, when you look at a baby's face, it puts a smile on your face, and you can't help but to be happy when you see a baby. So, we went from extreme happiness to extreme despair and sadness, and at the same time, juggling this sort of guilt that I was feeling and this grief I was feeling for the loss of my partner. But in the other hand, I had this baby who was putting a smile on my face. So it was a real mix of emotions, I would say, that I was really struggling with and feeling really overwhelmed with the emotions as well.
Man, that is an interesting situation.
Yeah.
To see how you come from a position of sadness or happiness to a position of sadness, and then you regain or you rebuild yourself back. And if someone is going through that situation right now, like, what will you tell them?
Yeah, the sad reality is that there's many, many people who are going through similar situations every single day. And, I think I would start there, right? I think after a couple of months, I started to do a lot of research on the topic, right? Myocarditis that I mentioned earlier, the condition that she died from. I wanted to understand this condition a little bit better. And as I started to do the research, I started to read stories out there where other men or women had lost their partners to myocarditis, or parents had lost their children to myocarditis, and often, young people who this impacts. And I started to realize that, hey, I'm not alone in this anguish, because I think one of the biggest challenges is you feel like you're the only one who's going through this situation. Like, there's nobody out there who could possibly understand what you're going through. And just by going through those sort of stages of understanding that, wow, there's a lot of other people who are going through the same thing, it just made me feel part of a broader community. I no longer felt alone, and I felt as though there are people out there who have suffered the same fate in terms of the condition, and also the same fate in terms of the partners or the parents. So I think that was the first stage. Just remember, as alone as you feel, probably the situation you're facing right now, there's hundreds or thousands or maybe even millions of people around the world who are facing similar situations at the exact given moment in time. So that's the first thing. And then I think the second thing, if I was just to pick two top things, is it's around accepting support. Yeah. I was lucky enough to have that support system immediately around me, but I didn't accept it as quickly as I should have. Right. I was lucky enough to outsource that decision making to my best friend. And, that in hindsight was a great move that helped me through that period. But I didn't accept the help immediately for the care of my child as early as I should have. And so I think that's the other thing, just realizing, look, in order for, if you're in a situation like that, where you have a child or there's children involved, knowing that you need to be resourceful in order to take care of that child. And by becoming unresourceful, there's a very limited range of options you give yourself. If you're very tired or if you're very sad, there's only so many actions you can take in that given moment in time. And how much can you really be there for the baby that really needs you, or for the children that really need you? And so you have to give yourself something before you can give it to the loved ones that you're trying to support. At the time, it feels a little selfish, like, oh, I'm going to put myself first now.
Yeah.
But the reality is that we have to come to that realization. You have to put yourself first, take care of your well-being, so you're resourceful enough to be there for the people who need you. Yeah. So these are the two top things, I think. I think it's getting an awareness you're not alone, and secondly, accepting the support. And if the support's not around you, try and seek it, because there are in every community out there in the world, there are institutional organizations that will come out and provide support during these times. And so it's about either seeking it yourself, or if you're not in a position to do that, asking someone close to you to help you find that support.
At the time, is there any institution or organization that supported you with your situation?
There was there were folks who started to reach out. So there was a lady who was known as the baby whisperer, and she had so she was basically great with babies, helping them through early stage of sort of being newborns, with routines and sleeping schedules and things like that. Through a mutual friend, she had heard about the story, and she reached out and said, hey, I'd like to come and see you, see how your baby's doing, and all of this sort of thing. So she didn't ask for any money or anything like that. She just came, spent time with me. She checked everything, like how the baby's sleeping, how am I doing, how is she doing, gave lots of good advice. She left a book with me, which I could follow as a something of a guide. So really useful. Just somebody coming and spending half an hour with me, made a world of difference. Just knowing that the things that I was doing as a first-time parent were validated, or there were areas of improvement, which of course there always were. So that was very helpful. But I think the real life-changing moment that changed the trajectory of my life from that moment onwards to where I am today, it really happened 3 months after Claire had passed away. My friend from the US, he at the time was a neuro-linguistic programming certified master. He had spent time with one of the co-founders of neuro-linguistic programming, also known as NLP. This is Dr. Richard Bandler in the US. And so one thing he organized for me was to fly over to the US. I mean, he invited me to the US. He paid for my flight, and, I crashed at his apartment and with his heavily pregnant wife at the time. And, he basically almost like forced me to go, because he knew that whilst I didn't want to be away from my child for, it was 8 days in total, that would be a transformative move for me to do. So I went almost reluctantly, but I went knowing that, hey, it's time to change something here, because I am sort of spiraling downwards, and something needs to change if I'm going to be there for my daughter. She was really the backbone for me, the sort of the light that was keeping me going at that time. And so she was the driving factor and the motivation behind me actually going. So I spent 5 days in a seminar with Dr. Richard Bandler, listening to his sort of stories about transformation and so on. And I think it was on the fourth day, my friend had organized for Richard Bandler to see me one-on-one. So he invited me into his penthouse, which was in the same building where he was delivering the seminar. And we spent 45 minutes in a one-on-one session where he effectively transformed my narrative, right? The stories that I was telling myself, and completely changed the outlook of my life going forwards. So that was a transformation. And I had heard about NLP before, but this was the first time I had interacted with the tools and the techniques and the frameworks. And fortunately for me, it was applied from the master himself, from the co-founder himself, Richard Bandler. And yeah, it really changed a lot of things. And so, maybe I'll just mention a couple of the sort of NLP techniques in that room.
Yeah.
Like we basically sat across the room from one another, probably a little bit closer than we are now. And he really asked me, so what is the problem? Like, I understand you lost your partner and you have your baby, but if you were to distill the issue, what is the problem? And, at the time I summarized it as the following. I said, I feel really bad that she died and she's not here to be able to enjoy her baby. And I understand that I'm here and I should be grateful, but I also feel guilty that she's not here and she can't enjoy. And I cannot fully enjoy my time with the baby. And at the same time, I feel really bad
feel
for
really
her
bad
and I
about
miss her a lot. And all of the usual things that come with grief, you miss the person a lot. But it was complicated. And I said, I feel really bad that she's not here. And he did something that kind of shocked me at that moment. He looked above my head and he just said, what makes you think she's not here right now? And it was a sort of a shocking moment for me, because he made me feel like she was there right behind me. And, I think it doesn't matter if you believe in sort of spiritual beings or, life after death or anything like that. But I think at the moment, what he was trying to do was trying to shock and pattern interrupt my thought process so that he could then interject with some techniques. So he wanted to create a shock moment that would interrupt my narrative. And then we basically went through, various techniques that helped me to understand how I can change the way I was thinking at the time. Just to mention a couple of those techniques. Often when folks are suffering, as I was at the time,
All right.
we are replaying images, of maybe the moment of where you discovered your partner, wasn't breathing in my case, or replaying the videos of, for me, that moment where I'm performing CPR on, my wife with the baby crying next to me.
Yeah.
Or these images of, the look on her parents' face when I told them that sadly their daughter had passed away at this incredibly young age. These were images and videos I was replaying in my mind, especially when things would quieten down, in the evenings and in the night. And they were causing the majority of the problem for me. And so what we were able to, one of the techniques he used in that session was for me to basically put one of those images up in my head. And then, look, it's going to sound a little sort of unrelatable to an extent, right? What I'm going to say next, right? Maybe I'm a little abstract. But we take those images and we basically shrink them down. In our mind, we shrink the size of the image down. And by doing that, we're actually reducing the significance of that image in our mind, the real estate that is actually holding in our psyche. So we go through this exercise where we actually, first we change it from a full HD 4K resolution, we change it to a black and white image, okay? And then as you might do on the old sort of TV sets, we turn up the contrast, right? So the image starts to whiten out, okay? So now you've removed the sort of the depth of the sort of the emotion from the image, the color, the resolution, and so on. And then we shrink it down. We shrink it all the way down to the size of a coin that you can hold in your hand. Okay. And there's various things you can do with that coin at this point, right? But what we did at the time was we flicked the coin away, okay? And so we did this over and over. And what we ended up doing was, we built this sort of neuro sort of pattern, which was every time these images come up in my mind, I immediately interrupt the image with this technique of making it flash black and white first, then increasing the contrast, shrinking it down, and then flicking it away. But that, of course, wasn't enough, right? We also had to then replace the image. And
Yeah.
so in this situation, he made me think about an image that I held very dearly in my heart, that I was very fond of, a very happy memory. And so, of course, there were many of those, and I pulled up one of those in my mind, and I paired it up with one of the bad images. And so what we ended up doing was we shrink this image down and flick it away and replace it with a happy one.
Wow.
For a period of time, I had to do this consciously, right? So when I left US and I came back home, every time these images would come up, I would consciously do these exercises. But what I found after a few weeks, this would happen automatically. Every time one of the bad images would come up, it would immediately, within a fraction of a second, shrink down and be replaced with a good image. So it's
Automatically.
automatically, yeah. So we did this with many images, with many of those videos that were playing in my mind. And this was one of the many techniques he taught me at the time that I was able to take away. And within, I would say, 1 month, there was instant change in the session. And then within a month, there was a dramatic, long-lasting change that really changed the trajectory of my life going forwards and for my daughter.
So from there, that is when like you started living life again.
Yeah, this is where I basically changed my narrative, right? I started to understand that I was, what the stories I was telling myself, like why was I telling myself those stories? Is it because it's something that I wanted to tell myself because I wanted to feel sad about the situation? Is it something that society was, asking me to feel a certain way? Like when people would come and visit me and they would, of course, express sorrow and, hurt for me. Were they reinforcing like how I should be feeling? And is that why I was telling myself this narrative? And sometimes it can even be the loved ones around you. In my case, luckily it wasn't, but sometimes it can be the loved ones around you who are reinforcing that you're sad and this is really terrible and this is really going to affect the rest of your life in a bad way. And your poor daughter doesn't have a mother anymore. And, oh, how is she going to survive for the rest of her life? Like, these are some of the narratives that could be out there that people are suffering with. And often it's these collection of narratives that we're hearing from around and from within ourselves that reinforces the narrative and the message we live with. But the meeting with Dr. Richard Bandler I was able to change my narrative. I was able to reinstill in myself like the messages and the linguistics, right? This is why it's called neuro-linguistic programming, because it's all about how we affect our neurology through the linguistics, through the language that we use and the narrative that we tell ourselves and the programming, right, that we can consciously do in order to serve ourselves better. And so from that moment onwards, I was able to take a more positive reframe on the messages I was telling myself. Instead of, for example, saying, I feel really bad that my wife cannot be here to enjoy her daughter. I was saying, it's so tragic that she cannot be here to enjoy her daughter, but I'm the lucky one. I'm here and I should be grateful and I should make sure I enjoy every single
moment,
second and moment that she can no longer enjoy. If I don't enjoy those moments, I'm doing her a disservice. Those minutes she can no longer enjoy, I can. So it was a reframe, right? It was like, instead of feeling bad about that, every time I felt bad about it, it was a reminder to me that I'm actually here to enjoy those moments and I should. So, I did this across, hundreds of messages I was telling myself, reframing. And, after you do that proactively for a while, it then becomes an unconscious exercise that you can do without having to be so consumed by it proactively. Yeah.
That is interesting. Is that the reason why you decided to get into coaching, like to start kind of like helping people in that area?
Yeah, absolutely. Once I realized the power of NLP and the dramatic impact it had on my future, I became curious, what is the actual tools and techniques that were applied on me during that session and why were they so effective? And just to sort of step back for a second, after I met Dr. Richard Bandler, just 6 months later, I decided to move to the UAE, to Dubai. There's no way I would have had that kind of sort of attitude to change unless I had really had a dramatic impact on my state of mind. So as I mentioned earlier, my sisters both lived in the UAE, and I decided that for me to serve my daughter better, I need to be around some female energy is what I was thinking at the time. My daughter, bless her, she was stuck with her dad, for long periods of time. And by the age of 10 months, she was definitely in need of having some more family around her. So the company I was working for at the time, I took a complete break from work. But the president of the company, a gentleman called Eugene, he was very supportive, and he helped me to relocate to the UAE, where we also had offices. And so this gentleman, Eugene, he was actually in touch with me a lot during that period of loss, checking in on me, seeing how I'm doing, see how the baby's doing, always offering his sort of support if there's anything he could do. And eventually I realized there was something he could do. He could help me to relocate to the UAE so that I could get some help for my daughter in the form of my sisters. And plus I was kind of thinking at the time, there's a sort of a nanny culture out here in the UAE, so I could get some support for my daughter, official care, so I could really get back into the workforce. So I relocated out here and moved into the same building as where my sisters lived and my brother-in-law, and we were able to really get that support around us. I was able to relocate my parents from the UK to Dubai as well. So suddenly we were here, and we had the sort of the full setup of the family and the additional help you can get from the nannies and so on. But sort of fast forward 18 months from that point, I was on a flight from London to Dubai. I was going back and forth still, just, sort of visiting friends and organizing things around work and so on.
Yeah.
And on the flight, I met my now wife. So I remarried.
Oh, really?
Yeah. This is where the story sort of takes another twist. I remarried in 2022. So this is just a couple of years after Claire had passed away. And I think, sometimes people do remarry and they do find love again, but often it takes much longer. And I think NLP and the transformation that work had done with me was able to accelerate my mindset, where I was even open to meeting someone just a couple of years later. On the flight, I think my daughter was the one who picked her future mom. Because she was of course a COVID baby. She wouldn't really easily go to other people, and she immediately leaned towards the flight attendant who was taking care of that area on the flight. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. Like, she's actually allowed this flight attendant to pick her up and spend the next sort of couple of hours together. And of course, it was strange times. We were all wearing COVID masks and flying during this time, and it's always difficult to sort of connect with people and so on. But at the end of the flight, her name was Nadia, and she gave me a piece of paper with her number on there. She'd came to learn during the flight that, I was a single father, and, I was raising this baby with a lot of support, but on my own as a father. And she wanted to help. So she gave me her number and said, look, I live in Dubai. If you ever need help with your baby, I get on really well with her, or I resonate with your situation. I mean, I didn't tell her like this, the story, but she understood that I was on my own. And she told me later, like, she almost didn't give me her number. It's not the sort of thing she would confidently do normally, but she's glad she did it. So fast forward another 6 months, we got engaged, we got married. And today we also, just 3 months ago, welcomed another member of the family, baby Bella. And so we now have 2 daughters. Mia is now 5, Bella is 3 months old. I have my wife, and we have what some would look at as a perfect little family setup. So I've gone from this sort of survival mode to now a situation where it's almost a thriving mode. I have everything I need around me, feel very content. And it really allowed me to come back to the question. It really allowed me to come back to, understanding NLP and, having got the foundation of my life back in place. last year or 2 years ago, I decided to meet a well-renowned NLP coach here in Dubai. His name is Robert Simic, and I spent 10 transformational days with him in a workshop setting. So there were other folks in the room, and we spent 10 days together where I then became an NLP certified practitioner and became certified in a variety of different techniques as well, so I'm a certified hypnotist as well, which is, we can talk a little bit about that if you like, and also timeline therapy, which is, a really interesting tool and technique in the world of NLP. So became certified, started to really understand what it is, the mechanics of NLP and why they're so powerful. But that alone can seem a little abstract to people, like NLP, reframing and reprogramming the mind, like it's almost something that people are a little afraid of. And so what I wanted to do was pair that up with more formal coaching certifications. And so whilst I had done some coaching with folks in England in a more corporate environment, I wanted to formalize this. And so I joined the International Coaching Federation, which is a body that certifies standards and best practices in coaching and life coaching. And I became certified after a long journey of delivering hundreds of hours of coaching to clients, and also learning and having training at recognized and accredited institutions. So hundreds of hours of training and several hundreds of hours of delivering coaching and delivering transformation in clients. Then you can apply for the sort of the PCC exam. So just around 6 months ago, I passed the exam, thankfully.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
It was extremely difficult, but just at a place here in Dubai. So, now as an NLP practitioner and ICF certified PCC level coach, I think this really has given me the credentials, but also the comfort for clients, right? It's not just it's not just NLP. It's not just NLP. It also comes with the formal competencies that are required to become a PCC coach. So this combination works really well. Yeah.
Man, that's interesting. Your story is interesting, and I think everyone that is going through a situation like this can really, really relate with it. And just because of time, I just wanted to give give one advice for someone watching. They may not be going through the same situation like you, but maybe similar.
Yeah. Look, I'll look into the camera and just say, if you're suffering right now and you're going through a dark moment, you're not alone, okay? You might feel like you're alone right now, but you're not alone. There's people around you who want to help. Just accept that help. I made those mistakes in the early days, and in hindsight, I wish I had taken that help sooner. But just understand you're not alone, not only in the help that's around you, but also in the suffering you're going through. There's other people who have been through something similar. And so just know you're part of a wider community here. And don't feel afraid to sort of reach out for that support, because you need it for yourself to become resourceful. And there is light at the end of the tunnel. There is a future. I went from the darkest of dark places to a place now where I am well enough to help others, and you can do the same. Yeah, that's my message.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think we have to stop here, and I think we can redo another sessions, maybe some other day.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because your story is interesting, and I would love you to come back and tell people how they could help themselves, like how they could move from exactly like you, from a position of grief and sadness to that position of happiness.
Absolutely. I would love to come back, and thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Right.
I'd love to come back and maybe we can run through some actual techniques, which just take minutes, and people can, so folks who are suffering can apply those techniques on themselves and create transformation for themselves in the comfort of their own home. So it's powerful stuff, and I would love to come back and share that with your community.
All right, we'd love to have you back. Okay. So thank you everyone for listening to this interesting podcast. And if you like content like this, and you should like and subscribe to the channel for more contents like this. Thank you, and see you next time.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Man, it was deep.
Awesome. Thank you.
I was
Yeah, I think, we've run out of